Let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. We want to thank everybody that has enjoyed the Manely Broncos Podcast and everybody that enjoyed the special episode between Jordan and I. We're going to talk a bit more about this Broncos and Saints drubbing, if you will, from Thursday night, now that Brandon is in the house. But make sure you hit that subscribe button of the MHRT Network, and also make sure you follow the Manely Broncos Twitter handle at Manely Broncos. And also, as you can clearly tell, it is a two-man show tonight. So make sure you follow both myself and Brandon over there on X as well. That'd be at Brandon Miller PO. And, of course, at Cameron Parker PO. So thank you guys so much for checking in on the stream. And Graham, we salute you. Thank you so much for being a part of the stream. Brandon, before we dive into any of it, it feels like it's been a while since I've seen you. How are you doing? You doing good?
Yeah, did pretty well. The reason I wasn't able to do the immediate reaction to the Saints game is last weekend there's a cabin that myself and some friends go up to occasionally in the mountains, and they made the decision that we were going to leave at 5:30 in the morning on Saturday. So I had to
what crack of dawn.
I had to call it real early on Friday night. But no, it was fun. It was a good time. It was just like, I don't ever want to wake up that early ever again unless someone's paying me to do it. But yeah, I mean, other than that, definitely doing well. It was a good time to see the Broncos completely destroy the Saints in the return of Sean Payton to New Orleans. It was kind of interesting, an interesting week in the NFL in general. And like, I don't know if anyone else just like happened to notice this, but I feel like just across the board, all the quarterbacks are just terrible right now, except Lamar Jackson.
I don't know if terrible's the right word, but
most of them are terrible. Some of them are okay.
But so I don't know if
one of them is really good.
I don't know if terrible is the right word, but the production of like, you know, how everything has been significantly down. Like,
sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah, there was a stat that came out, and obviously everybody we'll dive a little bit into the game itself with Bo, but like all across the board, like if you will, like half the quarterbacks that were playing from, you know, either Thursday or the entire weekend had less than 200 yards passing. Like, and that just goes to show you where the landscape of the NFL is from the offensive side of things. You know, I mean, it's crazy where the landscape of, you know, the NFL is. So again, I don't know if terrible is the right word. I feel like it's a pretty strong word to use. But
I mean, I think it applies to a few players specifically just last week, but I don't know. It was just interesting to see.
Bo being terrible right now?
What's that?
You hinting at Bo being terrible right now?
No, not Bo. I'm talking about in general. Like in general, across the board, quarterbacks have been. I mean, you can keep it with low production, but I don't know. Like Patrick Mahomes against the 49ers, 150 yards, 2 picks, no touchdowns. Brock Purdy, like 3 interceptions.
Yeah.
What was it? CJ Stroud had like 80 yards total. It was wild. Jalen Hurts had, I think he threw 1 touchdown, which was okay. Aaron Rodgers, 2 picks. He's kind of been bad. I mean, it's just been interesting to see like how poorly almost every quarterback across the board has been. Matthew Stafford, Gardner Minshew combined for 4 picks in that game. Not a single touchdown was thrown. It just like, I don't know, maybe it was just a concentration of this last week that happening more often than usual, and it just kind of was more noticeable. But I don't know. It was weird because you look at like a game like the Broncos had against the Saints, and obviously we kind of wrecked them, and Bo didn't have a touchdown, but that's far from like compared to a lot of other games, like he had a good game. comparatively. He didn't throw 3 picks. He didn't throw for less than 100 yards. It was just like, it was interesting to see the discourse that we've seen in some cases with, like, specifically against the Jets when he threw for 80 yards in the rain. Mm-hmm. And then Stroud comes out, throws for 80 yards against the Packers, I believe. I mean, that one was a little bit different, I think, because they just got off to an insane start and they didn't really have to throw the ball. Because Joe Mixon had 3 touchdowns, I think 2 touchdowns at least on the ground. But it was just interesting. It was an interesting week of football. That's what all of this is to say.
So Ram asks this question, and we can have this little brief discussion here. But because of that quarterback play and because of where Mahomes is, should he be in the MVP?
Absolutely not.
MVP conversation. And I
absolutely not.
I mean, if you're asking, should he? No. Will he?
Oh yeah, he is. He's going to be because he's Patrick Mahomes. But I was going to bring that up as well. I think he's currently, I saw somewhere 3rd in projected MVP rankings or whatever. He shouldn't even be top 5. He shouldn't even be top 10.
Yeah,
he should not be remotely in the running.
If truly you are keeping things with the way things are and looking very objectively, not with this, Broncos, thing on your chest, but just looking objectively, of how Mahomes has played this year, there's an argument.
I mean, there's a reason that they just traded for DeAndre Hopkins.
There is a argument to be made that Bo Nix actually has been playing better these last couple weeks than Pat Mahomes. There is an argument to be made, and it just goes to show you, one, about how down the NFL is, but it also shows you how specifically down, the overall performance of Pat Mahomes is. I mean, they are 6-0 for sure, and that's going to be carrying a lot of weight. But in back-to-back weeks, no one is absolutely talking about the fact that Pat Mahomes won back-to-back games where there have been no touchdowns and no interceptions. And I think it was my dad who even mentioned that, there was something that came across the board, basically, that he saw in comments. And it was basically that, someone said Bo Nix didn't throw a touchdown pass. It was a really disgusting game. You know what I mean? So it's just so we're quantifying it because of he didn't have 1 touchdown or he didn't have 2 touchdowns. It's very disappointing that we are at that community, in the community of evaluating things, that where Pat Mahomes ends up having back-to-back games where they both won, or they won, and he didn't have a single touchdown, contribution at all in that game.
The biggest reason I bring it up is I feel like we're seeing a mix of Bo Nix being a rookie, and he's obviously still a rookie, and you're going to have rookie struggles, and that's going to happen. Yes, Andy Reid is an insane coach. That is true. But I think it's a mix of that, and I don't know if there's something going on with defenses. I know this has kind of been a thing for a little bit with, ironically, the Vic Fangio kind of defense that sort of took over the league, and a lot more too high safety looks, which is also probably part of it as well. But I just feel like across the board, you're seeing more strenuous defenses that are harder to throw against and potentially easier to run against, and we're also seeing a rookie quarterback go through rookie quarterback struggles. So it's just interesting to see both of those in tandem, where I feel like there's almost an additional factor that has to be taken into account of yes, does he look great? No, but he's a rookie and almost no one looks great. So I feel like you have to grade almost on more of a curve. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, and I get and I even get your point there, Michael, but I mean, But even then, if you go look at what what Nick's has even done, he has that beast of a coach also with Peyton. But like one of the things that
Andy Reid is better. I'm sorry, I love Sean Payton, but Andy Reid is insane. I know. I'm mostly just giving Andy Reid a shout out because he's an insanely good coach.
But I just think that but to that same, if we're continuing that conversation a little bit too, it's like, Peyton clearly proved after the game that he had against the Chargers, that he needed a get right game, and unfortunately or fortunately, it was the game against the Saints. But one of the key components of how Bo Nix has been playing is he's keeping a lot of plays out of harm's way, and that's, I think, a huge credit to Nix with his performance and his play, because he is finding plays to win, whether it's been the passing game or more often than not in the running game. So. But it's a fun conversation, not just Nick's side of things. It's a fun conversation to have just in the entirety of the NFL. Because maybe there's this case where the entire offense is just completely down, just as a whole with the NFL. So looking at this game, I will say this, looking at this game specifically with the New Orleans Saints, and this is something we kind of touched on and briefly touched on our so on 5280, Brandon, but like I think that, when you look at it from the winning formula side, I think the Broncos found that winning formula. And that is, hopefully, and hopefully those performances can carry week in and week out. But, his legs is a significant weapon that obviously none of us, had on our radar screen. Like, it significantly lifts the ceiling for this offense going forward as he develops, as he develops into a quarterback. But you add that to the mixture of Javonte Williams for what we saw on that game on Thursday night, and then obviously the Jaleel McLaughlin, specifically, and then you also have the offensive line, with the way that they performed, basically being a grueling and ground and pound running football team is the way that they need to go from a winning formula side of things.
This is what my opinion of this game was, and I agree. I think there's definitely a formula here. Bo's legs have always been a weapon. Like, that's just been the case through the first several games of the season. Almost to his detriment, to be honest, because he's proven that it's not necessarily been the wrong play, but there could be a perfectly clean pocket and he will bail early and run because you can. Like, that's unfortunately one of the issues with having a quarterback that can do this sort of thing, is it can cause a borderline stunt in development, or just slows down development a little bit because they do things like that. I mean, this was a Josh Allen issue. Josh Allen did this as a rookie, where because he can run a lot and well, like, he's just bails out of the pocket. I'm not even saying this against Bo. Like, I'm not trying to trash talk Bo or anything. I just think that is unfortunately can frequently be a reality for quarterbacks that are able to run like that. I'm not even saying that Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix and Josh Allen are the same type of athlete. I don't think that's true. And he's obviously not Lamar Jackson by any means, but I do agree. I think that's certainly a weapon. I think there's a couple things that played into this. One, I think we have started to, and maybe need to try to lean on this more, to use his legs intentionally, as in like call designed quarterback runs. He's been insane, but he's also run more than anyone else. I think there's like a volume aspect to it, but yeah, I mean, he's a very good rusher. The other thing I think that played into this is, and is part of the winning formula in general, is everyone else that's not Bo finding success on the ground. Because that's something that has not been happening, and pretty much until this last game and to a point the game before that in terms of Javonte Williams getting going a little bit more. And I think that can be attributed to the Saints just are an absolutely atrocious run defense. I mean, that is true. But I think Mike McGlinchey coming back, Mike McGlinchey is a very, very good run blocker. That's kind of been his specialty since we signed him. That's what he's known for. He's an amazing run blocker. Pass protection is where he's like, a bit less of a sure thing there, but not that the Palczewski didn't fill in admirably, because he did, but I think McGlinchey is just a much better run blocker in every sense, and that made a big difference as well. So I agree. I do think that there is a winning formula that we kind of found, or like something that we found that we need to have in order to win, and I think that's more running, but I do think it's specifically more on the ground from people that are not Bo Nix. We can certainly use him on the ground, and like I think we should continue to do that. But I think if he's the only person that can do anything on the ground and you can't get anything out of your backfield, that's where it hurts you. But I think we have the personnel that can hopefully continue that. Obviously, we're not playing the Saints every week, although ironically, we're about to play the Panthers, who might be somehow worse against the run than the Saints are. So I think we're going to see another Javonte Williams career game. He might even get another 2 touchdowns. We might see Jaleel get a touchdown. Like, I think we're going to run all over the Panthers, just like we did against the Saints. And I think that's going to help us for sure. But I think we have to find a way to continue that moving forward. Like, we just have to there has to be something else that's successful that does not rely on Bo, whether that's his passing or his running. And really the only way to do that is to get more success on the ground.
And I think that, I wasn't trying to gear that, that the winning formula is just simply Bo run the football. It was just that they have a running identity, and I think that that's where I think the part of it, of him using his legs, is such a unique weapon, because we all agree that like his legs were a weapon coming out of college. It's just, and then I think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are starting to realize that, he has legs, but he's a lot quicker and a lot faster than a lot of us certainly, anticipated at this point. He may be using his legs, but he's also, to your point a little bit too, it's a bit detrimental, at times in the pocket. However, and Payne has even said this before, sacks are a quarterback stat, and he to this point through 7 weeks of the NFL season has proven to be pretty darn elite, if not elite already, at avoiding sacks. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, I was actually even looking it up, because he's been a comparison to, Bo Nix. Jalen Hurts has, I want to say it's 23 sacks on the season, and Bo has 9. I mean, like, it is absurd how well Bo has been able to avoid that area. And I think that what you also are starting to see is they are starting to get a chance to incorporate a lot of the RPO game, a lot of the designed rollouts a little bit to get him, away from a pass rush necessarily, and create opportunities for some of his, maybe less than desirable weapons. But I think, a couple players who have really stepped forward, Brandon, are rookies, but one specifically is Troy Franklin. He led the entire NFL, tied with Dontavian Wicks in separation. It was 100% separation in week 7 against the Saints. And if that's going to end up being the progression going forward, the Broncos very well might have something with Troy, because he's taking advantage of the opportunity. He obviously has, the speed to burn. And so and then even so, while the snaps are certainly better than what they were with Marvin Mims, they could still maybe be a little bit better. But I think that given the fact that you're starting to see Franklin be sprinkled in a little bit here, I think is, definitely something that should not go unnoticed. And I think that, for the specifically Nix and his development this early on in the season, you've got to capitalize on a previous working relationship between the two of them. And so far, it's working right now.
Yeah, I think Troy Franklin being more involved in this offense is definitely going to continue to be a good thing. And I think he's proven to be more reliable than he did at the beginning of the season. I think we need to lean on Devon Vele more as well a little bit. What's interesting to me is the complete lack of Cortland Sutton that we saw. Like to the point where he didn't have a single target. I don't know if that was just completely accidental. I don't know if that was a little bit of a, I'm not saying we're trying to phase him out, but like, I do wonder when we talk about, and we'll get to the trade deadline in a minute. When we talk about trades, I think we're going to be more sellers than buyers in two specific ways, not in a, we're rebuilding way, just more in a, I think we have players that people want, and I think we might be trying to go younger. And we're also
specifically one offense, one defense.
No, they're both on offense.
Because I would go probably one offense, one defense.
The players I'm specifically thinking of are offense. We'll get to it, but what I'm saying is like, I don't think it was I don't know for sure if it was like an intentional decision of like, we're going to give Cortland Sutton less because we're trying to phase him out of the offense because we might be trading him. But it was interesting to me that just like he was basically borderline non-existent and we're trying to get Troy Franklin more involved, which I think is a good thing, but it was just interesting to me. But I do think Troy Franklin, if he continues on this path and continues to show that he can be depended on, like, I think he's just going to continue to soak up more targets. And I think that's a good thing for Bo because he already has that pre-existing trust and relationship with him from college, which I think is definitely important. So that was nice to see. And I do think that will probably continue. And I hope it continues in this way because, we all saw the struggles of Troy Franklin, specifically in training camp and beginning of the season where he was not really great at coming down with the ball. And obviously he's a rookie and that's just something what the rookie wide receivers struggle with. But even a couple weeks ago with that super long touchdown bomb that he just flat out dropped, it was nice to see him bounce back against the Saints and kind of take on that. He was the leading target
even
share
too,
on the week. Chargers too. And he obviously ended up having a touchdown, but it's definitely nice to see. The other thing that interested me at least a little bit in terms of, as long as we're kind of talking about wide receivers, is I don't know what this coaching staff's opinion of Marvin Mims is, but I just don't think they see him as someone they trust to frequently use as a receiver. Yeah. I might be wrong. But that it surprises me, and I don't understand why.
It's going to be interesting to still kind of watch this unfold because he's a very elite returner. There's no doubt about it. He's a very elite returner, and given some of the stuff that is sparingly, I'm definitely curious. And then this actually is a nice little lead-in. Graham asks about the play calling. Also, what's up, Clayton? Yes, make sure you listen to Clayton and you smash that like button. And also share. To Graham's point, this is one where maybe they can start to kind of sprinkle in Mims a little bit more on this, Brandon. But like one of the few takeaways that I actually have from that Saints game was it was one of the first times that we got a chance to see Marvin Mims be sprinkled in different packages. One, if I'm not mistaken, or at least a couple times, they had Marvin Mims out of the backfield. And I thought that was really creative. So if you're not going to, maybe necessarily have him be a deep ball decoy, there are certainly a lot of creative ways that you can get Marvin Mims involved because the moment you basically place him as a halfback, if you will, or running back, is more of a likelihood that he's going to end up being, matched up on a linebacker just because of how things are schematically, So I think that, though that is one thing where I do think the play calling in general has actually gotten better. But from Marvin Mims, I'm still, kind of in the wait and see mode. But even though it may have just been, kind of tiny in the sense of, what we saw, I really enjoyed the fact that you saw that little bit of a wrinkle there with Marvin Mims out of the backfield.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to specifically say him as a receiver, because I think that him as a returner is great. Use maybe him a little bit in the sweep game. But there's something there with why they're not throwing him the ball. I don't know what it is, but it just is somewhat infuriating because we need more explosiveness. And I don't know where we're going to get it from. I mean, Devon Vele, great wide receiver, definitely more of the kind of similar to Cortland Sutton-esque. I do think Troy Franklin can kind of provide a little bit of that for sure, but I think Mims was going to be that true explosive weapon that you can target, and we just haven't done that. I don't know what it is. I feel like there's something that we just don't know that the coaches see. Maybe it's that they don't trust him because he has somewhat of a drop issue, which we don't even see enough targets to know that for sure. But it's just, there's something there that is just interesting to me because I don't understand it. But I do think that based on last game, I think we're going to see more Troy Franklin moving forward for sure. I'm waiting for them to use more Marvin Mims, and I don't know when it's going to happen. Could it happen still? Sure. Hey, Mike. Absolutely. I don't know. I just don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if there's just like, there's a reason that they're kind of shying away from using him that way. They want to use him in different ways. It just is interesting.
Yeah, and maybe that game against the New Orleans Saints where we saw that wrinkle of him out of the backfield, that is something maybe is a sign for us to, the appropriate word would be, appetizer, right? Like maybe that's an appetizer for us and Bronco fans, and maybe even going forward with some defenses that be like, hey, this is a little wrinkle here that you guys might actually need to pay attention to, because he could still very much be a focal point of our offense that going forward we're just going to use him in a lot of different ways to where he ends up being a true gadget player, and to where maybe he actually becomes the Percy Harvin of this team, where you see him in just so many different roles and positions. So I wouldn't be the least bit upset about that. It would just be nice to see some progression a little bit snap wise, and maybe Mike is right. He's probably gaining some traction. And that Saints game was just the calamari, the calamari appetizer for what's to come.
I think if we're going to see him used more, like this is the perfect week to do it, because you can do whatever you want against the Panthers.
Yeah. I think now we touched on a couple of the people here, but I think it's really nice that we have this conversation now. Look, we're talking about 2 games now from a particular player. We touched on the very underrated return, if you will, of Mike McGlinchey. He was fantastic. Even in the pass blocking game, he was fantastic against the New Orleans Saints. The run game was definitely noticeable from his side of things. And I think that, having him back there made, probably myself included, kind of shed a tear, because obviously all of us, or maybe a vast majority of us, were really on that Palczewski, bandwagon, and maybe he needs to be that right tackle of the future. And then they move, McGlinchey to left tackle.
I love what I saw from Palczewski, but I do think McGlinchey gives you more. But
seeing what he did on that right side, it was just a nice, return, if you will, to what he had and what he gave us before he went down to injury.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I was glad to see Mike McGlinchey back out there and looking pretty good. I do think I liked what I saw from Palczewski when he was in there, but if they're both injured at the same time, I'm
here. You gotta get to that.
But I think Palczewski has proven that he can be a very valuable backup tackle for us, and I think that even that is incredibly rare. So we got to do whatever we can to keep him. On the defensive side of the ball, I do want to bring this up too, just because I know you guys talked about it probably on Friday, but Cody Barton, I'm sorry.
He's going to be getting our overall
with your game.
He's going to be getting our overall game ball. And Bonnie posed the question because this is exactly what I wanted to kind of go with after McGlinchey, Brandon, because we're now entering 2 games now. The first one was a bit, so-so. And maybe that's balloons because we're all celebrating for the play of Alex Forsyth. But that was probably, and maybe it's a little bit of an exaggeration, some of the best center play we have seen since, where Lloyd Cushenberry was last year in certain spots. The run game was fantastic. The run blocking was fantastic. Any chance you have of seeing a center go down the field on even some center pulls, and he's going down with basically the quarterback or even the halfback all the way down to near the red zone, and he's punching dudes in the face like Quinn Miners. Like, that is a beautiful sight to see, and I hope that continues. And I realize that is his second game, but if that continues with Forsyth, I mean,
that felt drastically different from the Georgia's game because he struggled.
It felt drastically.
But, I mean, that was his first game.
It felt drastically different, but I think that the other part of it is that's just so fascinating. Is it's a lot like a baseball pitcher with his favorite catcher, right? Mm-hmm. And I know Bonnie's a huge baseball fan, so we'll appreciate this. But a starting pitcher is very comfortable with a certain catcher, right? So they've got that working relationship, and I think that given the fact Forsyth has that relationship with Bo, and given with what we saw out of him, and granted it was the Saints, it was a very injury-depleted Saints, he still took advantage and was an absolute bully all night long. And if that continues, you're talking about, again, it may be an overreaction, but the center going forward.
Yeah, I definitely think that Forsyth at least has proven he should absolutely be the starting center from when, moving forward. I don't know why we didn't play him sooner is just my thought process here. I don't know if it was just he, for some reason, was not looking as good and he just needed some actual live game reps to sort of get his feet under him. Again, he didn't look nearly as good against the Chargers, and then he seemed to kind of pull it together a little bit more against the Saints. And the Chargers game was literally his first start in the NFL. So that was absolutely something that played a factor into it. And maybe he just, again, needed a little bit more actual live game reps.
Settle down after
he did.
Turnaround.
It's interesting to me that you didn't see him played previously because Wattenberg wasn't
bad.
He wasn't great. But he wasn't
bad either.
He was okay.
But I think that this is the unfortunate side of things if you're Wattenberg, and the fortunate side of things with where you are at Forsyth. If this continues, you've got to play the hot hand. You can't mess around here. You've got to play Forsyth at center if this is continuing. Because if Wattenberg comes back, it's just the hand that you're dealt, unfortunately. If they're playing really well and and he plays exceptionally well, obviously, against the Kansas City Chiefs and against the Baltimore Ravens, then absolutely, it's a conversation that will absolutely need to be had, about, that center position, because, and we also can't get too ahead of ourselves because it is the second game, but that was a darn good performance by Forsyth.
Yeah. What I was kind of getting at is, and that I was trying to look up if they had announced any kind of a timetable for the return of Wattenberg at all. I know it was an ankle injury. Obviously, he's on IR. Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was there was any kind of he ended up having to have surgery on it, or what they thought the timetable might be on that. Obviously, he's on IR, so he's out for 4 games minimum. But what I was going to say is if you continue to see Forsyth play the way that he did, obviously he needs to be the remain the starter even when Wattenberg comes back. But I would not be surprised whatsoever if he just is the starter for the rest of the season.
You're saying
Forsyth.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you there.
I'm just the biggest thing to me is like I'm just surprised we didn't see them play him sooner. That's all it was, because like how he looked against the Saints, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Wattenberg has been terrible, but I think he left a lot to be desired at center, and I just think Forsyth, I know it's based on one game. It's a very small sample size, but I think Forsyth was significantly better to the point where I'm just like, I don't understand why you didn't play him sooner. Yeah. That's all it is.
Well, and the other side of it too is like, I don't want to damage the development of my quarterback necessarily from the underrated side of things with, playing a different center.
Well, yeah, but it's a center he's already familiar with.
Yeah, so it's just like, and if he's already,
that's why I'm just like, I don't know why you didn't play him. Anyway,
so like if he's already playing well now, after these next couple of games, yeah, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but it's the nature of the beast and it's nature of the game. You've got to stick with that hot hand, kind of like the running game. But Brandon, it's time we at least get to the best positives through 7 weeks of this regular season. And that is the Broncos defense shutting up everybody. That the 5-game winning streak that they had from the defensive side of things, where everybody was saying, oh, is it sustainable? Or, can they actually keep this up? Well, now we're through 7 games. And this defense is playing at an all-time clip. I mean, they are getting after the quarterback. The defensive line, specifically led by Zach Allen and company and the law firm of John Franklin Myers, we will say it every single show, until maybe, Scott Mason gives us some Papa Murphy's, pineapple pizza. But thank you to the New York Jets again, from the bottom of our hearts, for the law firm of John Franklin Myers. So he's been a huge contributor. Malcolm Roach has been a huge contributor. DJ Jones has even seen, a bit of a reemergence, back to where he was his first year in, with the Broncos. So, I mean, like he's been a sight for sore eyes, if you will. And then Brandon, then you go to the outside and, I think that Zach Allen has been getting so much praise, and rightfully so, playing at an all-pro level. But we need to have a conversation about number 15. Nick Bonito is playing absurd right now.
5 games in a row with a sack.
It's absurd. And I think the part of it that you're really starting to really see him really mold and become a much more complete pass rusher now, Brandon, is in run defense. You're really starting to see him really be a good edge rusher at setting the edge now. And like, he's not letting, runners get by him. I mean, he's doing a great job of maintaining his discipline, if you will. So that part of his game has been so fun to watch. And specifically given the fact that he's got such a quick get off.
I would not be surprised if we see both Nick Bonito and Zach Allen extended before the end of the year. And I think that those are both the right call.
But they also have to extend Jonathan Cooper too.
Can they?
You
have to pay one of them, but I would pay now. I would pay Nick Bonito, and I think Jonathan Cooper is insanely good.
But I think that you can pay both, though.
Maybe they do. I just think those two specifically, we're not getting into the season with them getting an extension. That's just the way I see it going. Will they still probably try to pay Cooper? Sure, but I think those two specifically will have new contracts by the end of the season. I'm just calling it right now.
But you're still talking about you're still talking about players that are still under contract versus Cooper, who's not under contract. I'm not hating.
They're both, but next year's they're both of them. Their last years on their current contracts, and you got to lock them up.
So I think they do lock up all 3 of them. Personally,
I think they're going to try it, but I just think specifically those 2. I think Jonathan Cooper's insane, and I know he's obviously has more of an expiring contract, but I think you got to pay them before it gets more expensive, and I wouldn't be surprised if both of those get done. Zach Allen right now looks like the best interior defensive lineman in the league.
look,
He looks better than Chris Jones.
Yeah, people can come after us all we want, but the analytics back it up. The stats back it up. Zach Allen is playing at a much better clip than Chris Jones from the Kansas.
I mean, Chris Jones is an insanely great player. Insanely good. Yeah. But Zach Allen is stupid. Like, it's actually insane. Like, he literally looks like I don't even know. The borderline second coming of Aaron Donald. Like, that's a bit too much. Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah.
I would put Dexter Lawrence at 2. I mean, you could certainly make the argument that he's ahead. Like, I wouldn't be mad at you for that. I'm going to say Zach Allen. I'm putting Zach Allen ahead of him, but Dexter Lawrence is also having an insanely good year. Yeah. I mean, I think at the very least, you got to extend him yesterday, because how long has it been since we've had any sort of even consistent pass rush from the interior? But not even good, just consistent.
2015.
So like almost a decade. And this is like,
I mean, am I off base there? Like,
I think that's about right.
Yeah. Malik Jackson and Derek Wolfe.
Malik Jackson. Yeah.
You know,
even then Derek Wolfe was kind of, I mean, he was getting older. Both of them were technically, but Zach Allen is an absolute monster. And like, if we're talking the Zach Allen, Draymond Jones conversation, that conversation has been
shut that up real quick.
That's been over for
and to be fair,
a while.
He played really well, Zach Allen. Zach Allen played really well last year.
Mm-hmm,
you know,
he did.
And he's just taking it a step up, to where he's just playing so well right now.
Well, the other reason I'm saying extend Zach Allen yesterday, we obviously have a significant amount of cap already for next season, but if we extend him now, I mean, he's an almost $20 million cap hit next year. You can get that lowered and get even more cap space to work with.
You can also up his guarantees too.
And you can up his guarantees. He earns. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, they should just give him a bonus for no reason, like at all. They just give him a raise. But yeah, Zach Allen is a beast.
Yeah, my personal thing is they lock up all three. Meaning
I hope they do.
Meaning Cooper and Zach Allen and Nick Bonio. And frankly, this I don't mean to play too spoiler alert, but the defensive player that I was saying that they might move at the trade deadline, that's not a seller move, but it's also not a buyer move, is Baron Browning. I think that you could see a Baron Browning move where for a team that might need it, like Atlanta. I think you could see a trade of Baron Browning and but I think unfortunately this is what I will say for the Saints game and for him being back. It was just about timing. He hadn't played in all season. The offsides penalties, that was just about timing and had nothing to do with how bad Baron Browning is. It's just the unfortunate nature of him just really kind of getting his timing back, getting his performance level back. But if he's here and he plays at a much higher level, and let's just say they, in this offseason, because of his injuries and because of, maybe the nature of maybe, how they can view him, meaning in the national landscape, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised, Brandon, if he actually comes back to the Broncos, given the fact that the market and what you see from him might actually end up being a bit lower than he actually wanted.
It could be. Yeah, for sure.
So that's the one guy that I had, which was moving Baron Browning at this trade deadline. Spoiler alert.
Let's just get into the trade deadline. I don't see us being buyers at this current time, but I do think you could see some people that could get moved, specifically on, I'm going to say, the defense and the offensive side of the ball.
You said offense a couple minutes earlier there.
I do think Baron Browning is going to be interesting, but I do think the main guys that I have on mind here are on the offense. One of them is Courtland Sutton. I would not be surprised if they get some offers for Courtland Sutton, because I don't think he's going to be on the team next year. And if you can get anything for him, I would get it. Would it suck? Sure. Would I hope we get some kind of receiver back? Yeah. Would I hope maybe we even just use that capital and make a completely separate trade for a wide receiver? Absolutely. I don't know what it would be. I'm not even saying it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen. The other one on the offensive side of the ball that at this point, I don't think it's as common, but potentially Garrett Bowles. I don't want it to happen because he's been very good, but I also don't know if he's going to stay. Those are the main two on the offense. It's mostly just motivated by, are they even going to be here next year? Because do they want to resign? Defense, go ahead.
Well, and actually, I will say from the offensive side of things, I will throw a wrinkle into this in the sense of two other offensive players. I agree with Courtland Sutton. That's one of them. Mm-hmm. But I will say this. And, this is something that, was somewhat on my radar. And given a certain article that just dropped here from Manely Broncos legend, Mike Liss, it might be worth noting that Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham.
Those are my other ones.
Yeah, are going to be generating some buzz. So I would, and what I thought was interesting, and we don't need to dive too much into this, but he did say that don't be surprised if the Broncos kind of dabble them around to see if they can get a wide receiver, running back, or tight end in return, kind of dangling Stidham and Wilson around, in those kinds of deals. So I thought that was a bit interesting. But anyway, continue.
No, those were the other ones that obviously aren't starters, but I do think just given the depth in the quarterback room, I don't think we would trade both of them.
Yeah.
But I think they're both going to get significant interest, and I would not be surprised if one of them gets moved. Sutton and Bowles were my potential offensive starters that it could happen. I don't really think it's going to, but at least definitely not for both of them. But I do think that could happen. And yeah, I mean, Baron Browning could also be in that conversation. I'm not going to say DJ Jones. That was not who I was going to say. I do think Baron Browning is going to be in that conversation of potential guys that could get moved. Mostly because I also think one player we haven't even talked about on the defensive side of the ball in terms of the pass rush, mostly because you haven't really seen it much because the other guys have been so good. But I do think they want to find maybe a way to see more of Jonah Ellis, and even DeAndre Tillman. So,
yeah, I agree. And specifically, if you're looking at the Baron Browning is expendable conversation, Jonah Ellis is the reason why Baron Browning could very well be expendable because, for what we saw in the period where Browning was out, you saw some flashes from those guys like a DeAndre Tillman, from a Jonah Ellis. Tillman specifically because it was like the run defense didn't skip a beat. Sorry. And I think that given his size, you can truly use him as almost a traditional defensive end, not an edge rusher. And I think that, having that to your benefit on the defensive line makes it so much more flexible for you. So, but Jonah Ellis, yeah, I'm definitely curious about that. And I think that now that Benito is performing the way that he has and Ellis is, where he is, they're both systematically kind of the same type of player to a degree. But now you can kind of get creative in the future. And this is obviously knowing and looking into the future for what I hope and that are going to get Benito locked up. You can get creative in a lot of different situations with Benito in certain packages and certain pass rush situations with both of them on the field.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I would be surprised if Baron Browning doesn't get traded.
Yeah, agree.
But those are my guys. I don't think we're going to be buyers. Could it happen? Sure. I think one position, obviously wide receiver, that's a given. I think that if we are maybe looking at potentially targeting some people in trade, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know who's going to be available at all. Maybe there's no one available, but I wouldn't be surprised if safety gets some looks.
Safety, yeah.
Because we kind of need it a little bit.
At least with one particular position, and that would be PJ Locke. I will
PJ
say
Lock, yeah, because Brandon's looked pretty good, but yeah, PJ has been okay. He's also currently has an injury, and we haven't really seen much of Jail Skinner. Go ahead.
But I think that if you're looking solely at what they need to do and what they should do, is really look at that offensive side of the ball. So I think that this is why maybe the quarterback side of things and then moving on from a player is a bit enticing, because maybe there's a way that you can work a certain deal, work a certain trade where maybe you include a Jarrett Stidham, or you include a Zach Wilson. I think that this is where you might get a chance to see Wilson's interest a little bit higher, given the fact that he's younger and given the fact that he's, such a young piece, if you will, to possibly use in a trade, and obviously he plays quarterback. That I wouldn't be the least bit surprised, if maybe that's the quarterback and the route that they go if they want to acquire another player, like maybe a tight end, because part of me thought, obviously, the biggest pipe dream is, for me and positionally is tight end, not necessarily wide receiver, but it's tight end. And I was originally thinking, why don't they maybe, I don't know, include Zach Wilson in this deal for maybe, David Njoku, right? Well, the Cleveland Browns have like 15 quarterbacks on their roster, even with, the Watson injury. So it doesn't make any sense to include Wilson in a deal, for, something like that for Njoku. Jarrett Stidham obviously has got a lot of familiarity with the New England Patriots, right? Maybe do you have just a conversation starter, with the New England Patriots about maybe how comfortable do you feel about Jacoby Brissett? That kind of deal. And maybe do you want to have, Brissett, or do you want to have Jarrett Stidham? And, maybe that's a conversation for the Patriots. And then maybe
but Belichick was still there. Jarrett Stidham would be on his way over there right now.
Yeah. And then maybe, in that deal, you take Hunter Henry. Who we know that, has, a lot of familiarity with, Joe Lombardi. So Hunter Henry specifically is maybe the one tight end that I'm kind of eyeballing, given the, the connection with Joe Lombardi. But
I can't see them trading Hunter Henry, but I think it'd be I think I know I talked about this before, and I still stand by the injury history, but dude's been balling out for the Patriots for the past few weeks. The only reason I don't think he'd be available is because he's been a very consistent weapon for them, for Drake May.
For specifically Drake May, I know. And that's like the one thing. It's like, I don't know if they would want to destroy the development of May. Like, I really don't.
No, they need to keep Hunter Henry.
But tight end specifically is the position, that I'm kind of solely focusing on.
Yeah. I honestly don't know who's going to be available at tight end, because I don't think Hunter Henry is going to be available. I don't know if David Njoku is going to be available. I love him as a player, and I think he would be a great fit. And it's possible because they're going to be in some cap danger, and also they're just in hell. Like, that entire team is atrocious. But he's pretty much their only consistent offensive player right now.
What about Juwan Johnson?
Juwan Johnson is interesting. That could be someone that, that would be potentially someone I would see us maybe going after, because I think the Saints should be sellers. I don't know if they will be,
despite the fact that
they just paid Alvin Kamara, and he has a broken right hand.
Yeah. How did he break his right hand, by the way? Was he signing his contract extension? Oh!
Yeah, it happened in the Chiefs game. And he's 29 and they're 2-5. And one of their wins is against the Panthers. Anyway, yeah, Juwan Johnson's interesting. Juwan Johnson, I would not be surprised if he finds his way to Denver. Taysom Hill. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want that at all. I really don't want that, but Sean Payton.
He loves Taysom Hill, apparently.
Dude, he's 34 years old. And Kyle Pitts, I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to be available, because he's also been kind of showing up a bit for the Falcons, and they need more wide receivers. And I mean, I mean, he's kind of a wide receiver, basically. They need more options in the passing game other than Drake London, so I don't really see him being available. One player that I want to get your take on in terms of a potential trade available target.
Position?
What's that?
Is it same position?
No.
Okay.
It's a wide receiver.
Okay.
Now, do I think this is going to happen because of a trade that was just made with the Chiefs? No. But Calvin Ridley. The Titans are an absolute dumpster fire.
Brandon, what did I say? Anybody that's been a Manely Broncos fan knows what one of my free agency dream fits were for the Denver Broncos. Do you remember?
I remember you liked him.
Yeah. Calvin Ridley was one of my dream fits for the Denver Broncos. But I don't know contractually if it's going to be able to work. But that said, the Titans are also...
I don't know. The Titans are atrocious.
I was going to say, though, the Titans are also idiotic. They're moronic. They don't make really good decisions. They clearly are committed and threw all sorts of money around a situation where now they're clearly giving up on a lot of assets. So maybe, you call about Treylon Burks and you call about, Calvin Ridley. You kind of feel the waters a little bit, so I don't... But the unfortunate,
and especially since they just traded Hopkins, they probably want to keep Ridley. But Ridley, that whole offense is just they got to blow it up. They got to blow it up and start over.
Which is crazy because of the amount of money that they threw into all the players that they brought in, almost acting like, hey, Will Levis is our guy, but we are going full on.
Yeah, he's not.
Full on into basically this offensive identity when it's not there. So I don't know. Maybe not this year for Calvin Ridley, but maybe something to monitor for next year. But the one that I thought you were going to go with, based on position, was I don't think it's going to happen. But I am somewhat kind of eyeballing what's happening with Dawson Knox. In the Buffalo Bills, where it gets a bit unfortunate and interesting with the Buffalo Bills as well. They're a playoff team. They're winning games. They continue to win games. They're not going to end up being sellers. They're going to end up being, they're going to be not sitting on their hands. They're going to end up being buyers. They're going to make more moves than just Amari Cooper that they just made. So I don't think it makes a ton of sense to move on from Dawson Knox there.
Well, especially with Kincaid's potential injury that he's suffering with right now with that collarbone injury. I think actually they're both injured, but I can't see them trading Dawson Knox because
it's the Mark Andrews argument for Baltimore. Yeah. Well, and the one that I will say, and I just thought about this today, and it's unfortunate that he's injured, but the emergence of Tucker Kraft with Green Bay.
Tucker Kraft has been a good player.
But I'm just saying, Luke Musgrave. I mean, Luke Musgrave is hurt, and I think he's going to be back. Not going to be back for a couple of weeks. But Luke Musgrave would have been an ideal target, for the Broncos to go after, as a trade target.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. There's got to be something. There's got to be something that we do. I don't know what it is. Until recently, the entire landscape of tight ends in this league was bad.
Yeah.
No one was being used at all.
And maybe they draft one, maybe they do, but
maybe.
It's just,
would you trade for a tight end or a wide receiver?
I would trade for a tight end.
Personally. Over a wide receiver?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I wouldn't hate it because the thing is too, is I think that much to what we talk about the connection wise, there is a way where you can trade for a guy like Mike Williams with the Jets, reunite him with Joe Lombardi. And I realize everybody that has been in Broncos country, saying, why do you want to bring in a guy, who's getting a bit over the hill and he's had injuries. And it's just well, look, they also had Tim Patrick in the room, Cortland Sutton in the room, and Josh Reynolds in the room. It's not the first time that they've had a room of 6'3" and above wide receivers. So the moment you put him in a room, and specifically with a quarterback that you can probably have a lot of comfortability with based on Williams' catch radius and Sutton's catch radius, it affords you the opportunity to where, you can have a player that's going to be stretching the field down vertically for either Cortland or Mike Williams. So, I mean, like, there's just a lot more flexibility you can work with there. Mike Williams is definitely not the player that he once was, and this is positive, not the player that he once was at the beginning of his career. He's a far better player than he is now. But I don't know. I think that, it's going to be very interesting to certainly monitor. And actually,
you know what I don't understand? Why has Donald Parham not been activated at all?
Yeah, that's going to end up being one that I think that is going to be, worth monitoring, because I don't get that at all. Another wide receiver, and this is a nice little transition to who we will play in the preview of this game against the Panthers. How about calling Adam Thielen?
Would he want to come somewhere where he's not going to have a chance to win a ring? I mean, he's like 34.
Well, to be fair, he's rotting
he's not
there.
Win one in Carolina.
He's rotting down there in Carolina. I mean,
That's true.
Adam Thielen, and think about it too. The Broncos were really high on him in the free agency. I think it was with Sean Payton, right?
Yeah,
they were really high on Adam Thielen.
Especially since they just traded for Deontay Johnson, who's kind of been showing up for them.
So
that's an interesting name. I mean, he's like probably a 1-year rental at most, but
well,
I mean, if you're talking about guys from the Panthers that you could maybe trade for because they have no value and they have kind of done almost nothing, but just maybe get a fresh start. Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah.
Not been good. He's not been good, but maybe give him a fresh start. You can get him for
if it's the
almost nothing. He was on an absolutely atrocious offense.
Maybe Xavier Legette too. Maybe while you're at it.
No, there's no way they're trading Xavier Legette.
This Panthers game, it feels like it's somewhat turning into a trap game. And for anybody that that didn't get a chance to hear, unfortunately, Andy Dalton and his family and his dog were in a car accident. Everybody obviously was okay. I didn't get a chance to hear about injuries, but our thoughts and prayers go to the Dalton family and, of course, the dog, of course. But due to the fact that he was in the car accident, he will not be starting, and they will be sending out Bryce Young, out there on Sunday. And man, I hope that this isn't kind of leading to the idea that this is going to end up being a trap game, for the Broncos, Brandon. But I'm definitely kind of eyeballing this situation, knowing the fact that he's also a first-round quarterback, but he's also one that has looked really, really rough. And, he's also going up against a defense that they pressure the quarterback like no one's business lately, right? And so
Bryce Young, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
This is the absolute worst time for you to be put back in the starting lineup.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. The two greatest memes that probably would be out there is, like what's the famous video from college, the guy shaking his hands, wasn't it the Oklahoma State quarterback? Yeah, Oklahoma State.
I don't remember who it was.
He's like shaking his hands, but then like somewhere like in the top right, you have the stadium pulse going on.
Yeah.
And, like that would basically be, in the first snap of the game, that would be Bryce Young, against the Broncos defense. But it's unfortunate that that's the kind of, events that turned for Bryce to be starter. But I will be very disappointed. I mean, obviously a win is a win, but I'll be very disappointed if the Broncos don't win by 10 or more.
I'd be shocked if we don't win by more than 10.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocked.
So what do you want to see? What do you want to see in this game?
I just want to see the continuation of the running game. I talked about it a little bit earlier. I think it's going to be very possible because you can do whatever you want against the Panthers. What I really want to see, I want to see Bo Nix have a game like he had against the Bucs.
And Saints, to be fair.
He had a good game against the Saints, but I think he had a better game against the Bucs. I just want to see him out there confident. I want to see him sling it. I want to see him get into a rhythm, not bail out of a clean pocket. And we can use his legs. Use your legs. Absolutely, please. We should call more designed runs for you. But if I see him take a 5 to 7 step drop, face a little bit of pressure, step up in the pocket, and make a laser 15-yard completion to like the middle of the field or outside the numbers, I would literally cry. That's all I want to see. I want to see him step up in the pocket. Please.
Well,
Bo, please.
And I think that, that's where going into this game against the Panthers, that's where I thought that the minor victory was for Bo Nix, but specifically the tight end position where, you got a chance to see the best player on the football team, Lucas Kroll, be involved. But, the way Bo was able to find him was the middle of the field. You actually got a chance to see seam routes, or a seam route to Kroll. And then obviously he, hit, what is it, like a kind of a small little curl route for Lucas Kroll right there. And, and then he goes for a first down. So I think that those types of plays, I think, are going to mean more as the season goes on. And so it's something that I'm kind of, maybe they don't go after a tight end. They actually do love the idea of the Greg Dulciches and, the Lucas Krolls and maybe the Donald Parhams, but you see them use the middle of the field just a little bit more, into where Bo is a bit more comfortable now using the middle of the field, which we know in college and at Oregon, he's definitely shown that he's very comfortable using the middle part of that field there. So I thought that was a minor victory from Bo's, or maybe major, depending on how you look at it, but just it was a win from his confidence side of things that he can use the middle part of the field there. So I'm with you there. That's kind of like what I'm hoping that they can use the middle part of the field. And if that's the case, it's those minor victories turning into big victories with Bo that, you're starting to see him get a chance to use the entire field now to his disposal, which you didn't get a chance to see, for a couple weeks there in the regular season. I actually think, and this is my bold prediction, Bo is not going to throw for 300 yards, obviously. But I think that my bold prediction is he's going to have just a little bit over 200 yards, and he will have 100 yards rushing.
It wouldn't surprise me. I don't know if I want to see that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I want to see him have, if he goes for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, and maybe he has 40 yards rushing, and Javonte Williams has a rushing touchdown and maybe 80 yards, I will be ecstatic. That's all I want. I want that and nothing else.
Yeah. But nonetheless, though, obviously a win is a win. I just hope
a win is a win. And it's, look, could be a trap game, sure. But I feel confident saying this is probably going to be a win. I'm just going to be realistic. I'm going to predict that it's a win, but that's what I want to see.
Moving forward to obviously one of our favorite segments that we've kind of been, introducing now on this year has been looking at draft prospects, right, Brennan? So who are some draft prospects that when you look at the, just the overall season, they don't necessarily have to be Broncos, side of things. But who's a player that's kind of caught your eye just a little bit, more and more, as the season's kind of gone on.
I'll let you go first because I was in a cabin with no internet over the entire weekend and watched absolutely no college football.
I will say, just from,
but I have a name. You can go first, though.
I will shed a tear, by actually saying this, just because I will say I watched it for a majority of the game. Sadly, and Mike knows what I'm getting ready to say here since he's in the comments. But Curtis Rourke, I will say, from Indiana, he is impressive. He is really, really impressive. He's a 6-year senior from Ohio. He's a Signetti transfer. And I really like the way that Indiana is actually gone about this. Under Signetti, it's a very different idea under the transfer portal. Whereas I think a lot of people just assume the transfer portal is, we're just going to bring all the best players from the transfer portal into our system and, and recruit them there. Cignetti is looking at the transfer portal and probably how it should be. And that is, if you have production, I don't care where you go to school. I will absolutely look at you. And Curtis Work was one of those types of guys, types of players who fit the bill. And he was dotting Nebraska up. And I mean, Nebraska does have a really good defense, but I mean, like he was making NFL throws all across the field. I mean, perfect throws, just absolutely perfect throws to where there really wasn't anything Nebraska's even defenders could have actually done anything about it. I mean, he was impressive. And I think he's definitely a better athlete than I think a lot of people may be giving credit for. He's a pretty good athlete, but super, super impressive for me watching, Work, do his thing.
Yeah. So speaking of tight ends, Penn State tight end Tyler Warren caught my eye.
Is that a certain play?
A certain play? I mean, pick one. Bro had 17 receptions for 224 yards and a touchdown against USC.
Well, I was going to say maybe the fact that maybe he snapped the football and caught a touchdown.
I mean, yeah, that was impressive. But just in general, like, we need an offensive weapon like that. And I don't even care if he's a good blocker or not, which we didn't really see him do. But we saw him snap the ball. He could be backup center. But he's interesting. He's someone that I'm going to continue to watch because I don't think he's been very talked about in terms of like tight end rankings. I think there's other guys that have been
Michigan's Loveland
talked more about than he has. But I do think like Colston Loveland. But I think Tyler Warren is someone that I'm intrigued to keep an eye on, and I want to see him. I want to see more of him throughout the season because every time I watch him play, I'm just salivating because we need something like that in the Broncos offense, like desperately. Colston Loveland is an absolute monster for Michigan, but like he might be a first round pick, which I probably wouldn't do. So there's some guys out there, but him specifically from Penn State is intriguing for me.
Nice. Yeah, he maybe I don't know. Maybe it gets to the point where the Broncos maybe they take that swing on a young tight end. Maybe they even go out and get a tight end that Bo is maybe awfully familiar with a guy by the name of Jake Ferguson as well.
Could be.
So yeah, I think it's certainly going to be a fun one to monitor, and hopefully the Broncos can come away with a victory over the Carolina Panthers. I want to thank everybody that has been in the chat. It's been an absolute blast. Michael Carmelini in the chat. Bonnie, thanks for the contributions there. Clayton, as always, man, super fan, of course, and obviously super fan Graham. Michael George, thank you so much for hopping in the chat. Big Mike, hope you were enjoying your Wingstop tonight. It was an absolute blast having you guys in the chat. Thank you again, and make sure you hit that subscribe button over there on the MHRT network. Follow both Brandon and I at Cameron Parker PO, at Brandon Miller PO. The show handle, of course, being at Manely Broncos. This has been another episode of the show, and hopefully we can talk about a Denver Broncos victory over the Carolina Panthers, and we don't have to talk about a trap game. And remember, folks, that it is always...
Let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
It's been a great show, guys. See you guys next Wednesday.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle.